Welcome back to Aspire to Lead. I have the great pleasure of having Tyler Comeau with me today, as he is a brilliant author of his brand new book, The Elemental Leader: Unlocking Your Potential Through Values, Perseverance, Adaptability, and Innovation. Before we get into this great interview with Tyler, I just want to mention once again that we've got a Unlock Your Leadership Potential live event coming up here just in a few days, October 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. As this is a follow-up event from the announcement of the Aspire to Lead cohort, which is really constructed to transform aspiring educational leaders to work through the main obstacles that we face in education today, go over important information about the cohort, specifically about the application requirements, the costs, the benefits, and of course, how this group is going to boost your confidence, gain practical strategies, and give you the direct mentorship needed to break through the barriers so many of us have seen. And you may be asking, who is this cohort potentially for? This could be for teacher leaders considering a move into administration, new administrators seeking peer support, or educators ready for practical advice, tools, and a direction as to what leadership position is best for them. So I want you to reserve your spot now, as seats are limited. There's a link in the show notes for free registration. Click that link to the event again on October 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's just going to be a quick 30 minutes. I'm going to have an option at the end for a Q&A in regards to the Aspire to Lead cohort. Looking forward to seeing everyone there. And with that, let's jump into this conversation with Tyler, as he's a dedicated educator, leader, principal, and lifelong learner, really pushing the boundaries of traditional education and assisting leaders all over the world with his brand new book, The Elemental Leader. Welcome to Aspire to Lead, where we empower educators and school leaders to grow, inspire, and thrive. I'm your host, Joshua Stamper, author, speaker, and leadership coach, bringing you conversations that spark transformation, challenge the status quo in education, and equip you to make a lasting impact on your campus or in your district. For more information and resources, visit joshstamper.com, as we're looking to ascend to new leadership heights together. All right, welcome back to Aspire to Lead. I'm here with a fabulous guest, a good friend of the show, Tyler Comeau, as I have his brand new book. He's in Canada. He's killing it. He's got a wonderful podcast that I have had the pleasure of being on as a guest, and I'm just so fortunate to be connected to this amazing leader. Tyler, thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
Thank you so much for inviting me on this show, and even the connection we made from the start. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes. Oh, I can't wait to dive into this book. It's fantastic. I'm going to be posting about it today. I highly recommend it. And let's start with your educational leadership background first before we dive into this wonderful text. But we just share with the listeners about how you got an education in leadership.
Oh my goodness. How much time do we have?
For you, buddy, as long as you want.
There we go. 3-hour episode coming up. I actually want to go back to before I even knew I wanted to be a teacher. I played sports growing up, and it's random. I'm from Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. And if people don't really know it, it's cold. We get long winters, but I was a tennis player up there and I loved it. And in the summers, I would play 8, 9, 10 hours of tennis a day. When I got into high school, I got certified to start coaching tennis, and I started running kids camps, which led to adult camps, which led to men's nights and ladies nights and co-ed nights and organizing tournaments, which led to running Northwest Territories tennis, which involved getting in little 2-seater planes and flying to all of the remote communities and showing up with a bag of tennis gear and portable nets and teaching people how to play tennis, and then leaving the gear with them, flying back and rinsing and repeating. I loved it. And I was into sports and thought I'm going to become something involved in sports, a physiotherapist type thing, because I wasn't skilled enough to make it as a pro athlete. And so what do you do next? You try to become like the equipment manager or the physio. So I went down to Lethbridge and I ran that tennis club. And through there, I actually started an in the schools tennis program again as well. Just like how you can compete in schools on like volleyball, basketball teams, badminton teams. I started a tennis league in Lethbridge for schools, and I would go into schools and I would teach the kids first. And then that would be in the fall. And then come spring, we'd have our tournament. And a lot of teachers, principals gave me feedback of, you should consider education. You should consider education. I tried it and I loved it because I was all about impact, and I wanted to impact the way that people went about doing things. It wasn't necessarily about a specific subject or curriculum. I just wanted to help people grow. And I'll never forget, I went back to Yellowknife when I got into the education program, and a boy came up to me and hugged me. Well, he's a young man at that point, and he hugged me and he said, "Because of you, I'm not in jail." But I was like, what do you mean? And he said, I was in your tennis camps, and you got me hooked on a sport instead of hooked on a drug, because up there you kind of had two choices. You were either doing drugs or you were doing sports, and there wasn't really an in between. And I got him hooked on a sport, which helped him grow into the person he became. And from that moment, I said, I need to do that on the biggest scale I can. And I wanted to do it through the lens of education. So then I started looking into, well, where can I go? And I learned that you could become a principal. And so I thought, I'm going to get an ed degree. I'm going to spend a couple years as a teacher, and then I'm going to try really hard to be a principal, because I don't want to just impact the classroom. I want to impact the school. And in becoming the principal, I learned that there were superintendents and directors and, things that you don't know about when you're little. And I said, well, those people impact divisions. And so I wanted to be able to impact the division of kids. And where I'm kind of at now in that journey is I'm seeing the bigger picture of this is global, right? Like you can have a global impact. And so I'm just trying to take that lens to the highest place that I can on the platform that I can, where people still want to engage with it.
All right. So typically I do projects toward the end, but you have a phenomenal podcast that I've already talked about. Having the opportunity to be on there, you do a great job. You have awesome guests. So I also think there's a bridge between the two, right? Between your podcast and your book. Will you just share a little bit about your podcast before we dive into this text?
Yeah. And, we got to have you back on, because the show has evolved so much since the first time you were on. But sure. Ideally, where this came from was the book came first. And it started in my master's, where somebody said, you could write a book. And I thought, well, yeah, maybe I could. And I loved Marvel, and I loved the sequence of What If that was on like the Loki series. I really liked that one. And it got me thinking, well, what if Aristotle was right and everything was governed by the four elements? And so I crafted the themes of the four elements within the book. And I thought this is a really good case study analysis of the world. And through the doctorate I'm working on, that's a really good research analysis from my perspective. And what's missing is the lived experience of the perspectives of the people around me. And so I said, I need to start a podcast so that I can get some triangulation here on what's happening in leadership for impact. And so Elemental Educator podcast was created as a way to bridge the academic and my lived experiences with the lived experiences of everyone else in the world. That's where it came from.
Okay, so let's talk about the four pieces, right? You've got earth, air, water, fire.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, and so you have this connected to leadership. So, as far as the book goes, what's the metaphor and how are these elements connected specifically to leadership?
Yeah, and when we think of the earth, it's the core. It's your grounding values. It's what you stand for and believe in. And so when we look at that in terms of leadership, you might call it like a mission statement, a vision statement, but it's more than that. It's what are you rooted in with whatever organization you're a part of that you're defaulting back to every time you have to make a decision? Or if you're pushing through adversity, what are you going back to remind yourself, this is why we're doing this and this is where it's going to go, right? So the earth kind of brings all of the elements together and grounds it. The air is the adversity we face. The wind can slow you down, but at the same time, the wind can lift you up. Right, Headwind as a pilot. I interviewed. His name's Tom Buck, and he's a teacher turned YouTuber. And he actually brought me into the idea of headwinds aren't always things that slow you down. They actually can create lift and bring you up. And so the air element is all about how we view adversity and face adversity and want to action adversity, which segues very nicely to the water element, which is about change. And so when you have to action change, what are the steps you take? Is it linear? Is it circular? Is it scattered all over the place like a garbage can model? What does it actually look like when change needs to happen? And that fire element kind of brings the air and the water element together, which is the decision-making process on, okay, now that we know that change needs to happen, what decision are we making to actually go about that change? Sometimes you're playing with fire when you make decisions. Sometimes they can spark success or they can burn lessons into your memory. And the fire element brings in that fun little metaphor of where is it going to ignite us and take us? And as long as those three elements are rooted back to that earth element, you're pretty much in a successful place.
All right. So now let's connect that to education, because obviously the educational sphere, specifically in leadership, is extremely complex. With those four elements, was there something that you saw as far as a need that you were trying to change or get the attention of leaders to say, these four elements are needed, and this is what you should do with that to be successful in leadership?
Simon Sinek said it best. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what was so good about it was the message was simple. So by coming to these four elements and navigating them this way, what I'm trying to do is bring simplicity to a message of what is your why? What is it that you're doing? What is it that you're grounding yourself in? I'm in my doctorate studying principled decision making. And one of the things I'm asking people to do is talk about the ways they make decisions. And that's a very overwhelming question in education. If you're listening to this podcast right now, flood Josh with tons of emails on all the types of decisions you make. I'm sure he would love to read every single one, the thousands that will come in, because we make so many decisions every day. Whether you're a teacher, whether you're a parent, whether you're a principal, around the realm of education, you make decisions. And if they're not rooted in something, if they're not held to an earth or grounded, you're going to lose yourself along the way. And no matter what, people are going to disagree with you, but you're going to have a lot more disagreeing if it's not rooted in something.
All right, so let's go back to the earth component, since it sounds like that's kind of the core piece, the base, if you will. So in your experience, what practices help leaders stay rooted in their values when faced with some of those challenges that you were talking about? Maybe it's organizational, or maybe it's even ethical.
So there's two types of values that come into play. There's the individual, and then there's the organization that the individual works for, right? And so as an individual, finding what you value is very, very, very important. And I'm going to tell you, you don't value going to the gym. You don't value your coffee in the morning. You need to throw those aside. And who are you? If you have a family, you need to, metaphorically, you need to throw the kids and the partner aside. And you need to look at, what do you actually stand for and believe in and hold yourself high to? If people are interested, I have a course that should be launching in the next month here that helps people unpack what those values are. You can find it on the website, which I'm sure will be linked in the show notes of this podcast description. But once you find out what you truly value, then it can lead to, what are you going to tie back to when you have to make a decision? Is this connected to my values? If you're thinking about a major change, like maybe you need to cut staff members, maybe you're thinking of a split grade, maybe I'm trying to keep it in the realm of education here. Maybe you're trying to decide where you need to allocate educational assistance and leadership. Are you connecting that back to a value? Now, I give a personal value. The same thing applies to a business model in an organization. They are going to create values too. And you're usually going to see those either as a list on their website that says, here's what we value. You're going to see it in a mission statement. You're going to see it in a vision statement. You're also going to see it in things like a 4-year education plan if it's in education. You're going to see it in statistical data on what are they performing well in, because if they're performing well in things, that's probably an indication that's what they value. More often than not, what you see is claims that we value something, but then stats show it's one of their lower numbers. So how do we actually make that a value and action that value and default back to it? So if you have a value of maximizing learning, every decision you make needs to come back to the value of, is this maximizing learning? Is this what's best? I hope that gives some clarity on that.
Yeah, for sure. Will you share the website right now, Tyler? I'm going to have it, obviously. We're going to talk about it at the end of the podcast too, and I'll have it in the show notes. But, you had talked about that course. I know a lot of folks will pause this and start looking for your website. So will you just share with them what that is?
Yeah, elementaleducator.com. And if you show up and you see that the course says pre-order, I want you to wait. They're going to go on sale when they come live, and then go ahead and get yourself into them.
That's awesome. And Tyler does a wonderful job with all of his video formats, and you're going to see awesome value, I know, not only in the course itself, but then also it's such a great production that he sets up. So let's talk about, Tyler, your water element, because you had shared some key words there. I think you said adaptability and navigating change. And so can you just share maybe a story from the book that really illustrates how a leader successfully balances that flexibility component and stability during times of potentially disruption on the campus or at the district level?
Yeah, and I'll share in a vague way without trying to give too much away here. But when you get into the water element, you're going to see an analysis of 3 world-class leaders, world-class organizations. And the important thing about the water element is water takes the shape of whatever container it's in. And to make change, you need to understand the container you're in where you're trying to implement that change. If you're changing the container, the water is going to shift and move a certain way. And if it's a matter of balance, you want to make sure that water is moving in a way that still creates balance, harmony. And what you're going to get out of the book, especially in that water element, in that water element chapter, is an analysis of how 3 leaders, world-class leaders, went about change in their organizations, how they did it, why it's important, research that backs what they did, and then underneath that, actionable strategies, worksheet almost type based things to help you in your real world, then action decisions for yourself.
Yeah, I loved all those different examples, specifically with the water element. Let's talk about fire. I feel like, and You said this earlier, Tyler, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, is that, and it doesn't matter your title, you make thousands of decisions in a day in a school building. It just happens. And as a leader, sometimes it feels like a lot more you have to make, and sometimes really impactful decisions. So for the fire element, if folks are feeling low right now, this October, November timeframe that we're in, where we got a lot of activities happening, of course, the holidays are coming up. And so that stress level is just kind of rising. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're staying passionate, staying creative in what we're doing, but sometimes we're also losing that energy that we are needing in that role. And sometimes we even lose that focus or long-term goal that we really should keep our eyes on. So do you have any, for this fire element, any words of wisdom for those folks that may be feeling like they're losing that passion right now as they're in the thick of it?
I have two thoughts that come to mind right away. And the first one is, if you're feeling like you're fighting every day, you're probably doing things that aren't aligned with your values. Or if they are aligned with your values, maybe you have the wrong values. And you need to analyze that again and go back and say, does this align with what I'm trying to do? Because when people do things that they value, it doesn't feel strenuous. It doesn't feel like they're draining energy. It feels like every time you do it, you're lifting yourself up. On the flip side of that, you also have people around you in a work setting that might not be aligned to those values. So if you have student behavior, chances are they're not aligned to the value that you're trying to uphold. So it's not so much about disciplining a student, disciplining a staff member, but it's a mindset shift of, how do I change the container so that that student feels a part of the value, that they understand the value, that that staff member knows what we're doing is aligned to a long-term goal. And so you need to create a challenge for yourself instead of, this sucks and these people are being difficult and I hate this, to, where are we misaligned and why? And if you can come back and ask that, now you can probably start to make some progress and some steps towards, here's what we need to do moving forward.
Yeah. So I want to talk about at the end, and we'll give an actual item for my longtime listeners. They know I do this with everyone, but each chapter there's a piece of reflection and time for them to take, actionable steps. And that's awesome. I really love that part of the book. You had mentioned too, kind of some things that they could use, forms within the book and the text that will help them in that. So your goal, your vision, Tyler, after you got done with this book, what is it that you want to transform from this resource? When they read the Elemental Leader, what are you hoping happens within these leaders after they're done with the book?
I hope people feel inspired to go back to wherever they are and continue the message that's in the book. Continue to think about, why are we doing what we're doing? What are we grounded in that we're willing to stand for? How can we go about change and look at things a little bit differently? And what are some of the hard decisions, hard conversations that we need to have? And how can we root them back to that earth element to make them meaningful and purposeful, and not just feel like we're arguing with people?
Today, we've really just introduced the four elements, and maybe they're kind of maybe a visionary topic that we're talking about. Is there anything that you would say needs to occur right away for them to put this into their daily practice?
We need to figure out what we value. We need to, again, it comes back to that earth element. And that's not something that you can probably do in an afternoon. But what you can start to do is, you can start to write down all of the things that are draining your bucket. And you can start to write down all of the things that are filling your bucket. And you can start to write down all of the actions you're taking and all of the decisions you're making. And then you can begin to analyze and look at, are there themes? What's emerging from this? What do we stand for? And you can ask kids to do this, and you can ask staff to do this. You can ask your partner at home to do this. What do we stand for? And from there, just collecting a little bit of information and listening to it, you can start to then implement little incremental changes that start to solidify your earth.
Tyler, I'm going to put you on the spot, and you can tell me, I don't want to answer this, but I think you have probably a long list. What is on your fill your bucket list now? And have those bucket item lists changed over your time as a leader?
I think they change just as I change, right? I mean, if you asked me what filled my bucket when I was 10, playing games, seeing my friends,
Comic
right?
books.
Right? Yeah, that's right. If you ask me what filled my bucket when I was a teenager, it might have been things like driving around for the first couple times, playing some sports, right? If you ask me what filled my bucket as a young adult when I was in college and university, sleep, right? That's actually been consistent, I should say. Sleeping, now
Still to this day, right?
sleeping fills my bucket. And it's so important that people should value sleep. It isn't a value for you, but you need to prioritize it and make time for it because it is one thing that fills your bucket quite significantly. I come back to that central theme of what is it that fills my bucket? Play. If I can make time for play, then my bucket is filling. And play looks differently when I was 10, when I was a teenager, when I was a young adult to what I am now. I'm still going to say I'm a young adult. But if I can find ways to get play in, I can fill my bucket. And if you can find ways to play at work, you're going to fill the buckets of people at work too.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question folks need to be asking themselves, but I also want to have an example for them because sometimes we lose our way and it takes a jolt of someone else sharing what they've got going on.
That's maybe not like, okay, so what can you go to work at tomorrow and be like, hey, I'm going to start playing. If you're in education, one colleague that I have, it's something so simple that they do every Friday during transition times and hallway supervisors or whatnot. They have a game of tag amongst the staff members or, something simple and silly like that. Or you ask them, what is something you want to lead? And they might give up a lunch hour to lead it, but it filled their bucket by getting to do it. Right. And so just explore people. Like, what is something I can bring into this setting that would make it more fun for you? And see what they say.
For sure. Yeah. For me as an art teacher, it was creating. So every day I created something, or at least spent time on something over time. And usually that was a teacher project example that was provided to the students. Sometimes it's off the wall and nothing to do with it, but the kids still loved it and they liked to see what I was working on, which sometimes spawned imagination and creativity in them to say, oh, I think I want to do something like that, right? As a administrator, it's very much different. And I actually had to write on my board the items that I wanted to have as a touch point every single day. And one of them was just building relationships. And that was all I wrote down. And so like to what you're saying, Tyler, it looks different for everybody. It looks different even in the hour. It looks different in the day, the season, right, of the calendar year. But I think if it's important, it needs to be visible and it's something that you can have a touch point for as many times as you possibly can have.
There's two things you shared. I just want to jump in on there quick.
Yeah.
The first one is this comes back to human psychology. And there was a study done with kids where they were playing with toys and one was encouraged to play aggressively with toys and one was not encouraged to play aggressively with toys. And it was just through modeling, watching parents. And they found that the kids, I'll find this study, I'll send it to you so we can link it too, so people don't think I'm crazy. But those that played aggressively were more aggressive growing up, and those that didn't play aggressively were less aggressive growing up. And that comes down to monkey see, monkey do behavior. We have mirror neurons inside our brain that want to act on what they see as well because they want to normalize with it because it's safe. They see somebody doing it, so they feel safe. So when you as an adult model something, you're showing other people that it's acceptable, okay, and safe. And so what can you model, right? You talked about you like to create in your art classes. You are actually modeling to people that this is an outlet, this is fun, this is entertaining. The things that you wrote on your wall as a principal, again, it's allowing you to model those things. So I love that. That was great.
Yeah.
I already forgot my second point because I love the first point.
If it comes up, Tyler, of course, feel free to bring it up. I wanted to show, we're talking about art. This is beautiful art on the cover. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, when I got this in the mail, I was hyped. So anyways, let's talk about, you had talked about your master's. You talked about you being a student and teacher. You're in the midst of your doctorate. So first off, congrats. I know that's a big undertaking, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you're researching, what you have to defend, and when do we get to call you doctor?
I want to preface by saying a doctorate is really a test of how much you can push through and push yourself through. It's not a testament of smartness, but it is, I would say it's a testament of how much I'm willing to invest in a topic. And the topic that I'm willing to invest in is decision making. Surprise, right? Like the earth element, the fire element, everything comes together on decision making.
Shocking.
The study itself, when you do a doctorate, you want to be very, very, very specific. You want to niche it down to something that you can, when you're done it, call yourself an expert in and be able to offer advice to the world on. And so knowing a theme of decision making and being in the realm of education myself, I delimited the study to public school principal decision making processes. I want to learn about how public school principals make decisions on all types of scales. And so what I'm trying to do is interview various principals across the province of Alberta, because that's where my study is also delimited to, and understand how principals at varying levels of experience make decisions and what impacts them the most and what do they prioritize and why do they prioritize that, in hopes of finding where do we need support. So I'm not going in it, and I might be going in it with the idea of validating what's already out there, but I'm also going in with what's not out there that has potential to grow, because I want to be able to offer that to principals and assist them in the decision-making process. So I'm at the stage where ethics is approved, the study is approved, so I'm officially a doctoral candidate, which means I now have the right to do the study. I have gathered the participants. We're going through the individual interview process right now. What's to follow is a focus group discussion once I'm done interviewing everybody to go over what I found, validate those findings, contradict those findings, see what else is out there. And then I get a few months to write, hopefully defending that final dissertation in May, a publication in August, and then potentially getting to be a doctor in convocation of November of 2026. Yeah.
Yeah. My family and I went to Alberta this summer for vacation, and it is absolutely
Where'd you go?
Beautiful. Most of our time was in Banff and Jasper.
Beautiful. It
was gorgeous.
Did you go out to Lake Louise at all?
Yeah.
So the lake that's by the hotel, I'm sure you know it's not Lake Louise, it's Lake Moraine.
Yeah.
And you have to go on a little bit of a hike to actually get to Lake Louise. Yeah.
Man, I've seen pictures online. It does no justice to being there, standing there, seeing it. It is absolutely gorgeous. So anyone that has the opportunity to go, I highly recommend it. We absolutely enjoyed our experience.
And if you've seen the Bride in the Banff Springs Hotel, let us know your horror story, because it's a haunted hotel.
Yeah, there's some pretty cool stories. I was geeking out too, just with the history and like how lakes were named from the different miners and all this stuff. We took a lot of tours, and it's just an amazing space. So just had to throw that out to you, because since you're in that area.
Travel Alberta. Sponsor this episode.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's talk about the actionable item. I had talked about that just a little bit prior in our conversation, but if there's something that our leaders that are listening can do tomorrow or next week to enhance their leadership journey, what would you recommend?
The first thing that I think everybody should do that you can do tomorrow, I'm actually going to steal this because I started doing it for myself, and it's changed the way that my days go. You need to start your day with a positive affirmation about your day. And if you're not doing that, it's going to feel like the most ridiculous thing. The context to this is I sat down in a conference, and a bubbly older gentleman said every morning he wakes up, he puts his 2 feet out of his bed, and he just goes, yes. And then all of a sudden, his mornings were a little bit better. And the story behind that is every day I went to school, and we had a kid in our school that came in, big smile, and said, today is going to be a great day. And half of my staff laughed at that because they thought it was silly. Half of the kids laughed at it because they thought it was silly. And I took it and put it into the morning announcements. And I loved starting my day that way. And it's not, I don't get out of bed and do it, but when I get to work, it's in my morning announcements. And it just creates the mindset of you decide what your day is going to be. And if you're going to make today a great day, then guess what? You're going to have a great day. But if you don't include something like that on your morning announcements, what kind of message are we sending? So actionable item number 1, you need to make it verbal so that people hear what it is you're trying to do.
We had on our announcements, our principal every day would say, make it a great day or not, the choice is yours. And that has been in my brain ever since, because it was every day that they would say that. And I think there's a lot of science that is backing what you're saying, Tyler, too, in regards to
Can I give one more for people that already do that? And this is just a reminder, go back to your basics here, the concept of locus of control. And for those that might not know what locus of control is picture some circles, and you have an inner circle, which is what you control, and an outer circle, which is what you don't control. And you can only control what's in your inner circle. And so when things happen that are not in your inner circle, you have a decision to make on how you respond to that. And if you're choosing a response of negativity, that's something that's going to bring you down. So how are you choosing to respond to something? You're not responsible for the actions of others, but you are responsible for how you respond to those actions.
Oh, I love both those. That's awesome, Tyler. All right. So if folks want to check out your book, your podcast, find out about anything else that you got going on in the course, where would you send them?
You can go to my website, elementaleducator.com. I am trying to grow Instagram, so that's at elemental_educator. And I do put out applied leadership courses, which take my episodes, and then I go and I find some research that backs what we talked about on the episode. And in 5 minutes or less, I do a little short podcast. Those are on YouTube at Elemental Educator. So if you can spell elemental and you can spell educator, you can find me.
Or you just go to joshsaber.com. I'll have all of that.
There you go.
On my page for this episode, but then also it'll be in the show notes. So if you're on Apple, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcast platform is, it'll be there for you to click on. We'll make sure that we've got not only the website, but then also the social media links. And Tyler, like I said, does a great job with his videos. So definitely subscribe to his YouTube. Find him on Instagram. He's got a bunch of videos there. His stories are great. Book's great. His podcast is phenomenal. So definitely tap into all of the things that Tyler's doing. Tyler, is there anything else that you want to highlight before we close out our conversation today?
If you've made it this far and you're still listening to this show, thank you. And remember that you're not alone in what you want to action. Surround yourself with people that buy into that story as well. Leave it on that, Josh. I think that that's great. I also just want to take a minute and say, I loved having you on my show. I can't wait to have you on my show again. I so very much appreciate you returning the favor and having me on your show. Once I get the book, we talked before we pressed record, Canada Post has been on strike for a little bit. So I'm waiting for your book to come. Once it's in my hands and I read it, you're coming back on. We're talking about your book as well. I can't wait to have that connection.
Well, Tyler, I just appreciate you, man. Not only for what you do in the world of education, but just how you amplify other people. You've been so supportive of me over the years. I'm just so honored that we're connected, that I can call you a friend. I also am just so proud of just your discernment, your knowledge, your wisdom. And I'm just so happy that you were able to come on today to share that with so many of the guests today. And definitely check out everything Tyler's got going on. And thank you, buddy, for coming on as a guest here on Aspire to Lead.
Pleasure is mine.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.